3D Branch from Dreamworks Trolls Acrylic Nail Art Tutorial by Hotpinkzebrapolish. Hi everyone! In today's video I'm going to be doing something for the movie Trolls. This video is going to be for the character Branch. I do have also Poppy and the logo, so I will put links to those in the description box below if you want to see them as well. In this one I'm going to do Branch, as I said, and I'm going to do his full character, so I'm going to do his feet all the way up to his hair in entirety, and his hair comes up off the nail onto like your finger a little bit, and it's made of needle felting fiber or wool, and I will give some alternatives to that later on in the video. If you don't have access to that or you don't own that like I do, I just have all kinds of weird crafting supplies that I use for different projects. But if you don't have that, I will say some alternatives later on, so keep checking for that. And I hope you enjoy this and check out the other ones, and don't forget to click subscribe to my future videos as well. So I'm going to begin with an overlay of white acrylic and just cover up that nail. And I'm going to try to keep this thin. I'm going to also add a layer of clear on top of it. So for this point, it's just for the color. It's not for strength or for the structure at all. And just cover that up. Sorry, I'm a little bit off camera there. So then, as I mentioned, I'm going to be adding a layer of clear. And as I said, this is really the point where you're going to want to build up your apex a little bit and give your nail some structure and some thickness. I have a tendency to make my nails extremely thin, and so I have to almost work at making them thicker. I know it's different for certain people, so just know what you have to do. And if it was thick enough after just the white, you don't have to add that layer of clear if you don't need to. And then I'm going to take and I'm just going to file it to remove any lumps, bumps, and imperfections. And in case it was a little thick, this is definitely the time to thin it out as well. And then I'm going to apply a layer of gel sealer and throw that into my lamp and cure it. So I missed a whole bunch of sculpting Branch, and I really apologize. However, it's very similar to how I sculpted Poppy, and so if you want, you can head over to that video and see how I sculpted her. And it's basically the same thing with just a different color. So I'm going to go and add some details to his face and some thickness. I'm going to really want to build up his cheeks area and his chin, and then have a little indent around where his eyes are. So I'm just going to have a little ledge about where the tops of his cheeks are, which is what I'm building up right now. And then I'm going to sculpt out his nose with gray, just like the rest of him. I don't have a separate color of gray that I used for his nose. I just painted it later. That's how I created the colors. If you have the right kinds of gray to use it just from the get-go, go ahead and switch the color. And so now I'm going to take and I'm going to be sculpting out his little shorts with brown. And when you're doing this, you want to make it with very, very thin acrylic so that it doesn't get too lumpy and too thick. So just make sure that when you're doing his clothes, it's on the thinner side of things, so heavy on the monomer. And then with a bright green, I'm going to be adding his shirt. It's actually more like a vest, I guess. And it's a little bit open in the middle. It doesn't quite close all the way. And add just a little ledge between the one side of the vest and the other, just to show that it's actually two pieces of material that overlap a little bit. And then I'm going to be adding his other arm. I only sculpted the one in the beginning since that was behind him, but this other one is on top of his clothes, so I wanted to wait a second, and I sculpted that one. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of thickness to his toes to make it so that it looks like they're coming out at you, and he's a little bit pigeon-toed, his toes kind of face in towards each other. So now at this point I'm going to be painting his nose with sort of a dolphin gray, so a little bit bluer, and inside his ears, and then add a little shadow around where his eye sockets would be, and around his chin and feet, and just a little bit to shadow him. And then with diluted green, I'm gonna make his gray a little greener. Like I said, my gray wasn't quite the right shade, so I'm just going to be tinting it at the moment with very, very diluted green paint. Now with black, I'm going to be painting all the details of his face, and so I'm going to start by doing his eyes, adding his eyebrows, adding little outlines in his ears and on his nose, painting in his little frown, and doing outlines just in general all over the place. Make sure that your black is slightly diluted. You don't want to make it so it's not quite as opaque, but you just want to make it thinner so that it's not too thick of lines. And I'm also going to add a little bit of hair at the base of his head, or at the top of his head, just in case your hair isn't fully covering it. That way none of the white nail will show through right at that point. And then I also filled in his eyes with white, added a couple little more of those dolphin gray eyebrows, and then I'm going to add some green on his shirt and his pants, and some black also on his shirt, just to make it's kind of like a leaf pattern. It looks like it's leafy, and so you want to make sure you add that texture. Add blue in his eyes, and then add a black pupil. And so now to add his hair, I'm just going to lay down some nail glue, and then take that needle felting fiber, as I said. And for alternatives, as I'm gluing this down, I'll just talk about that quick. You could take some fun fur, just like the fur that you get for making a costume at a fabric store, and you can tint that, and then you can cut it off the material base, and that would definitely work. Or you can just buy the appropriate color. Or you could take yarn and you could cut it into little strips and then separate out all of the little fibers and do it that way too if you don't have just like loose fiber. Yarn is basically this same thing that I'm using but wound into the yarn. It's so you can just unwind it and fray it basically. And I missed this part, but I also just trimmed the hair that's around his face. I'm going to take more gray acrylic and I'm going to go through and then just touch up the hairline a little bit since it got a little mist and it got a little covered up with the hair. So I'm just going to fix it up. And you won't want to do this in advance. You don't want to use much acrylic either, because the more you put on top of that fiber, it's going to sort of soak in and the line's going to get less and less exact. So you won't want to put the hair down first and then sculpt them on top, because it's just going to get kind of ragged looking anyway. So then I took hairspray, quite a bit of it actually, and I sprayed that fiber, and then I took and I sort of formed it into the shape of his hair, and then using a little manicure scissors that clearly wasn't sharp enough. It's not my favorite one. I have a different one that works better that I just couldn't find at the moment. I'm just going to take and I'm going to cut his hair to the right length and then continue to get it into the right shape. It kind of has this little pinch in right below the tops of his hair that I was trying to make there with my nails. And I used a little bit more of the hairspray. However, you could also use like a spray starch that you'd use for fabric, or you can take and dilute some white glue and sort of brush that on and work it. That's probably the least desirable option of the three, but it would work. And then I just applied matte top coat and I was all done. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you like this design, and don't forget to check out the other trolls nail designs I have. I'll put links to those in the description box below, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!